So this fellow who's importing refrigerators comes to the Haifa port and he says, I'm here to get my 7 refrigerators. So the guy says to him, you're going to have to pay tax. It's a resell. He says, no. Ze bishvili. The refrigerators are for me. He says, really? You need 7 refrigerators. Good morning, Diane.
Good morning, Freida.
So we're starting a Torah portion Shemini. So the guy at the Haifa port says to the Israeli businessman, you need 7 refrigerators? He says, betach. I have milk, milchiks. I have meat, fleishik, and I have pariv. He says, yeah, but that's 3 refrigerators. He says, yeah, but then Pesach comes. I need a meat refrigerator for Pesach, and I need a pariv refrigerator for Pesach. So the harbor master says to him, but what's with the 7th refrigerator? What do you need a 7th? He said, because once in a while, there's a little treif comes into my house, he says. So 7
I get the gist.
But for those of us who want to know about refrigerators, you don't need, I just koshered someone's home in Weston. I never saw such a big kitchen. I never saw a person with so many dishes in my entire life. And I have a lot of dishes. I couldn't believe it. She had gizmos and gadgets for everything you can imagine. I held it up. What is this? What is this? But we got it done. But in general, a refrigerator could be both milk and meat. You don't need a separate refrigerator. You just don't put the milk on top of your chicken. You don't put the chicken on top of your cheese, but you don't need separate refrigerators. So truth in advertising here. So this week's Torah portion covers a few topics, and one of them is kosher, keeping kosher. Now, just a quick review. How do we know when a meat or, an animal or a bird are kosher? Who knows the signs of a kosher animal?
With the hoof?
The cloven hoof.
Split hoof. It has to have a split hoof. And what's the second sign of a kosher animal? It chews its cud. You know what chewing cud is? They regurgitate their food. Mm-hmm. They chew it twice. It's called chewing its cud. And the Torah enumerates that there are some animals that have one of the signs, but not the other. And this is what the Torah writes. I want to read it to you. Which 3 animals chew their cud, but don't have split feet is the camel, the hyrax, and the hare. Which animal has split hoofs, but doesn't chew its cud? The pig. Huh. The which only have one of the 2 signs are not kosher. The Torah lists the names of the 3 animals that have chew their cud, but they don't have split hoofs. And the 1 animal that has split hoofs and doesn't chew its cud is not kosher. So the question the commentaries ask, didn't the Torah just say that a kosher animal needs to have the 2 signs, split hoof and chewing its cud? Why does the Torah have to, in the next passage, say, and there are 4 animals who have only one of the signs? We already know that if it doesn't have 2 signs, it's not kosher. So for an interesting insight, which is not the answer I want to focus on, is that you know that this is one of the questions, how you know that God wrote and gave the Torah. Because how is it that in the year 2021, we have not discovered a new animal that is kosher or non-kosher? There's no new animals have come onto the scene. There's no new discovery on Mars that a new, good morning, Marcy, good morning. Good morning, Margaret. A new animal was discovered that chews its cud and has split hoofs, or has split hoofs and doesn't chew its cud, or chews its cud and doesn't have split hoofs. So it's an interesting insight that no new animals have been discovered that are suddenly kosher. That's one of the insights to how you know God created the world. Because how is it that you don't have any new animals being born? If the world was man-made, if the world was made by some alternate, inventor, surely by now there would have been a different assortment of animals by now. An interesting insight.
It is interesting.
But more importantly, one of the insights I want to share with you is that sometimes we think something is kosher and it's really not kosher. Kosher, by the way, means fit for consumption. Sometimes we like to deceive ourselves that something is kosher. It's not. So the Torah, by emphasizing that if it only has one of the kosher signs, it's not kosher, is indicating to us also in a psychological insight that at times we try to convince ourselves it's kosher. I'm traveling so I could do this. After all, I'm traveling. The hardships of travel. Oh, it's kosher. I'll give you a story I read, a very interesting story about a fellow, I'm looking up, in October 1985, the famous racquetball player, Ruben Gonzalez. Have you ever heard of him?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So he was competing in a match that would determine if he would go into professional racquetball, if he would be allowed into the pro games, pro competitions. And he hit the ball, and it was questionable, the winning point, whether it hit the floor before it hit the wall, which means that he didn't win. The referee looks, and the referee determines that he won the match. And everybody's cheering. But before he accepts the award, he says to the referee, I beg to differ. I was up front, I hit the ball, and I realized it hit the floor before it hit the wall, or hit the wall before it hit the floor, whatever the rule was. So later they said to him, why did you jeopardize your own championship? If the referee said it was kosher, it was kosher. Don't worry, they didn't use the word kosher. I'm using the word kosher. So this is what he writes. You will never be a winner if you have not truly won, he writes. And he says, you will never be a winner if you have not truly won. This is what the Torah is telling us, that if the animal has one kosher sign, don't be deceived into thinking it's kosher. It's not. It's not. At times we like to tell ourselves, that's kosher. You know why it's kosher? Because A, B, or C. You know why it's permissible? Because A, B, or C. We convince ourselves something is kosher, something is fit, because it might be in our minds. And the Torah says, don't do that. If it's not fit, it's not kosher, it's not kosher. It's not kosher. I'll tell you another beautiful story I read about the Emperor of China. He was an elderly man, and he did not have any children, but he had to choose his descendant. Who's going to take over? So he made a competition. He said, anybody who wants to become the emperor after me will come to the palace. And he gave out seeds to every young man who came. He said, take the seed. In 6 months' time, come back to me with what you have planted and what you have grown from this seed. And this will determine who the winner will be, who will be the next emperor of China. And everyone went home with their seed. And there was one young man, Ling, his name was. No matter what he did, he could not get his seed to grow. He bought fertilizer. He used this type of soil and that type of soil, this type of water and that type of water. Nothing worked. He was horrified. How could I not get a simple seed to grow? Anyway, the day of the day of the determination comes, and all the men who signed up come back to the palace. And he's looking, every one of them has a gorgeous plant in their pot. A flower, a little bush, a little something. He's the only one who has a pot with dirt. Nothing grew. And he's literally hiding at the back of the line. He does not want to be recognized. He says, I'm not going to be the next emperor, but I can't. The humiliation is even worse. But you can't not show up. It's the emperor. So the emperor walks up and down the rows looking, and Ling is hiding like in the corner behind everyone, and he points at him and he says, you, come up here right now. And the guy is trembling, and the king says to him, let me see your plant. He says, Your Majesty, I tried everything, but the seed would not bloom. He says, you are going to be the next emperor. Emperor Ling. What happened? The emperor explained. He said, I gave everybody a damaged seed. I knew it wouldn't grow. All of the rest of you, you replaced my seed, didn't you? You took some other plant and put it instead. You were dishonest. You lacked integrity. But you, Ling, you did not lack honesty or integrity. So you will be the next emperor. And he became Emperor Ling because of the seed. This is what the Torah is telling us. Sometimes you think something is kosher. Listen, after all, I have to get this done. Be honesty, integrity is one of the most important things. Being kosher, so to speak, is more important than anything. It has to have both signs. A funny story, when I moved to Norwalk about 39 years ago, it's Erev Pesach, we get a call from a lady. Rabbi, she says, I bought a Purdue Leonard.
Sorry.
And I want to know how to salt it. So my husband said, Mrs. So-and-so, it's not kosher. She says, but Rabbi, I'm going to salt it. So he said to her,
What did she buy? I didn't hear.
A Purdue chicken, Purdue
Oh.
chicken. So my husband explained to her that the kashrus of the animal begins with the ritual slaughtering, the painless ritual slaughtering. Then you salt it and so on to take out the blood and clean it. She didn't realize, she thought she'll buy a chicken and then she could kosher it. So my husband had to tell her it's not kosher. So Kabbalah asks a question. What does it symbolize, the fact that an animal chews its cud and has split hoofs, and now it's considered kosher? Why those two symbols? Why did God choose those two symbols to create the kosher animal? So Hasidus, Jewish mysticism, explains something very beautiful. What's chewing of the cud? It's a double. They chew, sounds a little maybe rude, they spit it out and they chew it again. They regurgitate their food. That is symbolic of how we have to be in life. We have to think things through, mull things over, not be hasty in our actions, not be hasty in our thoughts, not be hasty in our speech. Good morning, Nora. And good morning, how are you? Welcome. We have to think things through. The Torah is showing us qualities in a kosher animal that we adapt for ourselves. You are what you eat. And we know that's true because all the scientists and physicians and homeopaths talk about that what you put in your body affects you greatly. And we're very careful what we put into our bodies. So you are what you eat. The second analysis is of the split hoofs. What's a split hoof? There's a splice in the middle of the hoof. In life, we have to differentiate between right and wrong, left and right. We cannot have one approach and say, this is it. We have to be able to discern what is right, what is wrong, what is the right way to do things, what is the wrong way to do things, when to go left and when to go right. And also, the split indicates that there is a separation. Light can shine in middle. You have to allow the light. You have to allow godliness in your life. You cannot be closed up in a way that you don't ever allow a new thought, a new idea, change, a different approach. Sometimes we're so set in our ways. That's a sealed hoof, a sealed foot. But when you have a split hoof, light is able to shine through. You're not stuck on the ground with no vision. You are able to allow light, knowledge, change, insights to influence you in a positive way. We're talking about positive influence. So the qualities of the kosher animals are those that we adopt when we eat kosher. If you notice, a lot of the non-kosher animals are predators. Now, they were created to be predators. They were created. The world has many things in the world. Doesn't mean you have to be like that. Maybe those things are teach us how not to be. So you'll notice the kosher fish, birds, and animals are all ones that are not predators. They're not excessively violent. They are more the refined of the animal and sea world kingdoms. You are what you eat. You are what you eat. And this is what the Torah is showing us, the insight of why we keep kosher. Now, it's interesting, kosher is one of the decrees in the Torah. There are the laws that God does not say why. Mikvah, kosher, God does not say why to keep kosher. However, Maimonides writes, even though God does not say the true reason and says, this is a decree. If you're Jewish, you eat kosher. We still are given the privilege and also the permission to delve into decrees. We're encouraged, God encourages us to find out the reasoning behind it. Now, you can't tell someone who doesn't keep kosher, you know what? You're going to die young. You're going to be unhealthy. Because people not of the Jewish faith are permitted to eat non-kosher. So that cannot be the compelling reason to eat kosher. Rather, we have to analyze for ourselves why we should keep kosher. And there's many reasons. One is what I discussed now. You are what you eat. Another thing is by doing the mitzvahs that don't make sense, enables us to develop a level of faith and a relationship with God. Not always do we do what we understand. Not always do we do, oh, when I understand it, I'll do it. God gave us these type of mitzvahs to develop within us a faith and a relationship that's not based on knowledge, intellect, logic. Even though Maimonides writes a whole health book, why it's not so good to eat meat and milk together. For example, he writes also like when you come out of a very hot spa, very hot shower, don't drink, don't gulp down ice water. So Maimonides wrote a whole health book analyzing the laws of kosher, health ideas, health reasoning. Why, for example, if you ever saw fish, you're allowed to have milk and fish at one meal. But Maimonides writes, don't drink milk with fish, it's not healthy. Don't drink a cup of milk with fish. Now, milk and meat is forbidden to drink together in one meal. But fish and milk, why not? Fish is not an animal. But yet Maimonides writes, it's not healthy. Keep it separate. Like don't have tuna fish with a cup of milk, so to speak. But again, this is not a law. This is more a health tip from Maimonides. However, with milk, you don't have a burger. You wait 6 hours after you eat milk, before you have dairy, and after dairy, you wait 1 hour. Okay, just a little insight of kosher. So going back, the laws of kosher give us an insight into how to develop our personalities, how we should approach life, and also give us a modem of connecting to God on a level that's not logical. God said, keep kosher, we keep kosher. Then we analyze why. And by the way, if you don't yet keep a kosher home, I bet you if you look in your cabinets and you look in your shelves and you look in your freezers, you'll find so many of the things you already have are kosher. They have the kosher symbols. So I always say, a woman asked me a few weeks ago, what's the first step to keeping kosher? I said, buy kosher. Step 1, buy kosher meat, buy kosher chicken, buy kosher items that have the kosher symbol. Step 1. Step 2, stop mixing milk and meat. She says, but my kids love burgers with cheese. Say to them, you know what, we're going to try it without cheese, or we're going to buy tofutti cheese. Try it, see what happens. If she calls me back the next week, I said, no, how did it go? She said, it went great. They didn't even ask me. I said, you see? So that's the second step. 2 steps and see how it goes. And then if you ever want to know step 3, you'll call me, I'll tell you step 3. So does anybody have any questions or insights about kosher?
Yeah, I have a
Yeah,
Go ahead, please.
so I recently saw a lot of like this Netflix documentaries that they talk about like veganism and how like meat, fish, they do bad to the body, like animal food. And there's like really scientists that has proven that those type of like animal food is like bad and it makes bad to your health. And I was like wondering like if it really does bad to your health, like scientifically, like is kosher food also like does bad to your skin, like to your health or not?
You mean kosher meat and chicken?
Right, like
Yeah.
meat.
Oh, yeah, so, you know, I read some of those reports, and that's why people are vegetarian. However,
Right.
in Jewish law, you are permitted to eat milk, chicken, and meat, provided it's kosher, right, with a ritual slaughterer. And as a matter of fact, it's very interesting. Did you ever hear the term glatt kosher? Glatt.
Sure.
Glatt means smooth. What it means is that when after they slaughter the animal and they kosher it and they cut it open, if there's any adhesions on the lungs of the animal, which means that there is illness, it's not glatt kosher. It's not smooth. It's not glatt anymore. It's regular kosher, but it's not glatt, and people won't buy it. They cannot sell it as glatt kosher, which means strictly kosher, but it really means smooth. So
Okay.
in Judaism, that if the animal had an illness or a broken limb before it was slaughtered or after it was slaughtered, they noticed something, it's no longer kosher, and it's not permitted to be sold on the kosher market. So that's one nice, interesting insight. Again, if the ritual slaughterer knife slips and he causes pain to the animal, again, is not considered kosher. It's sold on the non-kosher market. So there's a lot of stringencies in bringing kosher to the market that also protects us health-wise. But again, God did not write in the Torah, you know what? You want to be healthy, eat kosher. That's not what God writes. God writes, keep kosher because you are my people. And then we analyzing, like we're doing today, why kosher? What are the benefits of kosher? What are the spiritual benefits, the intellectual benefits, the philosophical benefits, the theory behind it, and so on. Now, if a person doesn't want to eat chicken or meat, it doesn't mean you're not kosher. Even when you buy fish, they have to be kosher. Even eggs, if they have a blood spot, they're not kosher. So kosher is not only for chicken and meat. And as far as those reports, it's up to you. You know, some of them are just reports. They're not proven or disproven. So, you know, I don't know. You know, I can't make that decision for you, so to speak.
Can I make a comment?
Please.
I would say with red meat and coronary issues, that to do everything in moderation. You're allowed to have it, but maybe moderation and maybe not so much gribbiness. So
Monks.
common sense.
Yes.
I have a question and a point.
Go ahead, Margaret. Go ahead,
One
please.
question is, just because it's killed, the animal is killed in a kosher way, it doesn't really mean that it was brought up in a less painful way. I mean, like, for instance, if you buy pasture-raised meat, the animals enjoy a better life. And I wonder whether kosher animals are, you know, pasture-raised or whether they're still like in coops and in, you know, enclosed areas. Do we know anything about how they're raised?
I haven't investigated, but I suspect that there are still, you know, companies. Don't forget the kosher people, the kosher, like the kosher meat producers, let's call them, purchase their cattle from cattle dealers. So when the ox, the cows, the buffaloes, because bison are bought by the meat companies that want to make it kosher, right? They don't really raise their own animals. They're purchasing from others.
Yeah.
But there's one of the 7 Noahide laws and one of the 10 commandments, one of the 7 Noahide laws, and in the Torah mitzvahs is Tzar B'Lechaim. You're not allowed to torture animals.
Mm.
It's a sin. You cannot hurt animals. You know, so yeah, you're exactly right. That kosher, like what we discussed before, it's not kosher. It's not kosher to torture an animal, then slaughter it and say, I had a good rib steak.
Yeah.
Why is that a mitzvah? So if it's in our jurisdiction, we should be very careful what we do with animals.
Right.
And if an animal, for example, is wounded and hurt, definitely should not be used for kosher, cannot be used for kosher meat, or an animal is ill.
Yeah, well, that's good. The other point is this sign, is this the sign of the Kohen? That?
Yes.
Well, it just reminded me when you were talking about the cloved hoofs, that it's sort of like a hoof that's open with the air going through. So that was sort of interesting.
Husband is a Kohen, and that's a beautiful insight, because why did the Kohanim make that sign? To allow the Shekhinah, the divine presence, to rest on their hands when they're blessing the people in Shul. You'll notice the Kohen puts his hands out and he covers himself with the talit.
Separate his fingers like?
To allow the divine presence to rest between his hands, so to speak. That's why when the Kohanim are blessing us in the synagogue, we don't look directly at the Kohen. The Kohen hides under the talit because we are not permitted to look at the divine presence directly at it. It says that you don't look at the face of the divine. You turn away because you cannot. That light is so great. So that's why. That's the concept of the split hoofs, that you allow by eating kosher, an animal with the kosher symbols, you're allowing the divine light to rest in your life, in a sense. That's what I was referring to with it. There's a split. The divine light is allowed to enter. Many times our biggest problem is we're not allowing the divine to dwell within us. We're cut off from our spiritual connection, from our souls. We don't realize it, or we're not sensitive to it. We don't acknowledge it. We don't want to acknowledge it. So that all of these are very beautiful insights. So Margaret, anything else you wanted to add?
No, I'll turn myself off.
And then we'll quickly go about the fish, the kosher fish. Kosher fish needs to have which 2 signs? Who remembers?
Fins and gills.
Fins and?
Gills.
Gills.
Scales.
Scales.
Scales, right. Yeah. Now, interesting that note, this is an interesting thing which I never realized, I was looking it up, that fish that have scales always have fins. But fish that have fins don't always have scales. Interesting insight, I never realized that when I was growing up. That again, fish that have scales always have fins. But fish that have fins don't always have scales. For example, swordfish is not kosher. The reason I mentioned swordfish, because there was a whole controversy on Facebook a few years ago where one of the rabbis declared it was kosher. And I'm like, no, in the Torah, it clearly says swordfish is not kosher. So it's interesting. So what's the symbolism of scales and fins? Anybody have an insight to that? So scales is like armor. It protects us. It's also symbolic of integrity, honesty, morality, ethics. Fins symbolize movement, action. But you cannot have movement and action if you don't have morality and ethics, if you don't have integrity. For example, suicide bombers, they're all about, yes, we will kill for Allah, we will kill 9/11, all this Islam craziness. But there was no morality, ethics. They had fins, but no scales. They took action. in their minds. But there was no morality or honesty in those actions. The same thing with the Nazis. Organized, efficient, fast-moving, but no morality or ethics. The Torah is telling us you have to have both. You cannot only have morality and ethics, because what are you going to do all day? Sit around? I have a lot of integrity, but you don't put it into action. What's the point? And there's those people that take a lot of action, but there's no morality or integrity in their actions. Comes the Torah and says you need morality and you need action. Another illustration is when the Jews left Europe, they left the shtetl. There was a split among the people. The people who had the Finns, action, we are moving to America. We have to assimilate. We have to move forward. Enough with the shtetl Jew and the shtetl Torah and the shtetl mitzvahs. That's not for us in America. And then the shtetl Jews who wanted to stay in one little town and didn't want to mix with the world. We have to maintain our scales. We have to maintain our armor. We have to maintain our morality. But there was no movement and no outreach. Came the Lubavitcher Rebbe and said you need both. You have to keep the Torah and its traditions, but you have to also be like a Finn. You have to move forward. You have to go out. You have to reach out. You have to mingle with the world and bring the world closer to Torah and traditions while living in this modern society. You cannot give up your scales. You cannot give up your morality or integrity. But you have to move forward as well with it in the modern day world. That's the approach. So fins and scales, this is what it teaches us. You need to move in life. You can't sit still in your little shtetl and say, I don't want to mix with the world. They're not for me. They're not for my people. They're not my type.
I have a thought. Oh, I'm sorry.
But no, go ahead, please.
Well, it just occurred to me that the number 2 is an interesting number. 2 parts for kosher fish, 2 parts for the hooves, men and women, 2 parts for the light to shine through. I just think it's interesting. So.
Yeah, it's beautiful. There's what's that Pesach song? One is Hashem, and then 2 other tablets that Moshe gave us. So the number 2 is very significant in
Zuzim.
Very good, yeah. So that's the some of the insight to the fish, the fins and the scales. You need movement, you need action, but you also need integrity, honesty. You need our traditions, Torah and mitzvahs, but you have to move forward in life with them. You can't hide in your little corner and say, I don't need to be with anybody. I'm all myself, me, myself, and I. Both don't work. Both approaches don't work. You can't renege on the past, but you can't also not look to the future. So we see the whole concept and analysis of kosher, to sum up, is the idea of how do we keep kosher practically, because it's not only philosophical, Torah is not only philosophical, but also it's practically keeping kosher, but also philosophically being kosher.
I have a question, Freida. So during Passover, there are 2 Sephardic Ashkenazi ways of approaching eating. You're not supposed to eat, obviously, bread and so forth. But if you're Sephardic, you can do rice, you can do beans. Like, how come?
Because I'll tell you why. Very interesting question. Again, this is about tradition, not halacha. Halacha means the letter of the law. The letter of the law is, for example, you can't desecrate Shabbos. That's for everybody. Sephardim, Ashkenazim, liberals, anybody, atheists, humanists, anybody. But tradition is what was brought from your home. Sephardic and Ashkenazi, excellent example. Now, the Sephardim, where they lived in the ancient times, if they were not permitted to eat kitnios, which is rice, beans, legumes, on Pesach, they would starve. This was their staple. And it wasn't chametz, it wasn't it's not forbidden. It's not leaven. It's not chametz, leaven. The reason the Sephardic communities didn't eat those products is because, first of all, they had other foods. They weren't in the same poverty or in the same situation. Okay, so they didn't have those challenges. And again, the Sephardic foods that we discussed, rice, legumes, are not chametz. It's not like they're eating bread because there's nothing else to eat. It's
Right.
more that, why didn't the Ashkenazim adapt that? Because the reason we're careful with rice and legumes is because, first of all, sometimes it grows near wheat and it could become intermingled. And two, again, the Sephardic communities lived in the European countries, not in the Sephardic countries like Morocco and Tunisia. And all those countries, there they didn't have the challenge that if they didn't eat rice and legumes, they would starve. So there was a leniency there. Again, not to eat chametz, but again, to eat something like rice or kitnius, which in the Ashkenazi communities might have mingled with chametz, leaven, wheat products. So it's a stringency. It's a stringency, but not something that's not forbidden. You understand the difference?
Yes, yes.
Another example is even when you look at the Torahs in the Sephardic community, they're in a box, like a silver box, and they hold old. You ever saw the Sephardic Torahs? They're gorgeous.
No.
Encased in a silver box, and they open it up. They don't have the handles like we have.
Okay.
It's not really on the same line, but again, it's traditions. So when it came to traditions, there are different traditions, but never would it be that a Sephardic Jew would say it's okay to eat bread on Pesach. It's okay to eat leavened products on Pesach. It's more, it was okay to eat rice, beans, legumes that are considered kitniot by the Ashkenazim, and we don't eat it. Again, in the generations when they had the traditions in the early years, there was no choice for the Sephardic Jews.
Right, right.
Careful not to allow the rice and the bean products to ever come in contact with wheat. But for Ashkenazim, we never did it and we don't do it. We follow the tradition. As a matter of fact, there's a little passage I saw that Minhag Yisrael Dinhu. Our traditions are on the same line as our laws, which means to say that we value them very carefully. Not that if you eat legumes and you're an Ashkenazi, will you be transgressing? God forbid. It's more that we value our traditions just like we value our laws. Is that clear?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So, so this kind of sums up the laws on the Torah portion of kosher, and it's really, kosher is a very, very interesting topic. You know, it's funny how many chats discuss kosher and Trader Joe's kosher, Costco kosher, kosher restaurants on Facebook. What to buy in Trader Joe's that's kosher? What new kosher products are coming out on Trader Joe's? You have no idea the discussions that go on. It's wild. I just saw a Facebook page, kosher drinking now. Kosher drinking, which tequila, which vodka, insane. But by the way, kosher is $1 billion business. And I was making this is just a little tip that I was making a presentation for the bakery and to a non-Jewish group. And I said, you're going to ask me why kosher. I said, Post Cereal, Heinz Company, the largest companies in the world have kosher supervision. Coca-Cola, why? Because it's $1 billion industry. It's a financial decision to make kosher. Because when it's kosher, you are reaching every consumer. The non-kosher consumer doesn't care. If Pepsi Cola has an OU, will that stop me from buying Pepsi at the Super Sunday? Not Super Sunday, Super Bowl Sunday? Will that stop me from buying a Pepsi at McDonald's? Absolutely not. But now the kosher consumer looks and says, kosher symbol, I could buy it. So it's $1 billion industry. So that's why kosher is now in the world one of the biggest industries. Hershey's, all these huge companies, all are kosher, many of them, because they realized you can make more money that way. So it's an interesting insight to kosher. So I read a book called Doesn't Anyone Blush Anymore? It's about intimacy. If you want to read it, it's by Rabbi Manis Friedman. It's excellent. And he writes a story that a bunch of college students came to him and they said, Rabbi Friedman, we're going camping and we want to buy only kosher food for the camping trip. Not kosher, he says. Kid, the college fellow says, Rabbi Friedman, I didn't even give you my list yet. Why'd you say not kosher? He said, not kosher. The kid says again, Rabbi Friedman, wait till I tell you what we're buying, then you tell me what's kosher. He says, no, not kosher. He says, what do you mean, Rabbi? He says, your whole camping trip is not kosher. Single boys, single girls camping out together in one tent? Not kosher. You're not married, you're in one tent, not kosher. Get married, you go camping together, he says to the guy. So the term, I was listening to the news and the reporter says, it wasn't kosher, was it? And the guy goes, no, it was about some kind of embezzlement. So the word kosher now has become like a universal word. I ordered, we were traveling and we ordered kosher food. This was before COVID. So the stewardess tells me, because I had all my kids, it was like 11 kosher portions. So the stewardess says to me, Freida, she says, I also only order the kosher on the airline. I said, why? She says, it tastes better. I said, okay. Funny. And when I moved here and I knew I was having a baby, I was in my 8th month, my husband became a chaplain at Norwalk Hospital. And he went into the kitchen and he had them bring in kosher food. Till this day, if you're having a baby or you're a patient at Norwalk Hospital, you could ask for kosher. They bring in these TV meals, which are double wrapped, and they heat them up in their microwave, which is permitted because it's wrapped in many layers. And now in Norwalk Hospital, you can order kosher food.
I remember well the chicken I had during Pesach. Adam's birthday is tomorrow. That maybe was not his best. I remember.
So now we're coming to a very sad tale in the Torah portion. I wanted to start with kosher because I felt it was such a vital topic. A very sad story happens in the opening of the Torah portion. So, they're in the desert, and remember we discussed how God commands them to build a tabernacle, a mishkan, which is a traveling Beit HaMikdash, a traveling temple, right? Like a traveling shul. And they build it to the exact specifications. And for 7 days, the Kohanim are preparing and practicing for the opening day of the mall. Of the Mishkan. I'm just joking. Because to do service in the Mishkan is very serious, it's very strict. It has to be precise and exact. So for 7 days they practice. And then all the Jews gather around the tabernacle, the Mishkan, for the dedication. And Aaron, the older brother of Moses, has 4 sons, Nadav and Avihu, Elazar and Itamar, with his wife Bathsheba. And they are wearing the gorgeous clothing of the priests. And they go into the Mishkan to do the first official service to God on behalf of the Jewish people. And a terrible thing happens. Nadav and Avihu, the 2 oldest sons of Aaron, are carrying censers. Censers are like plates with incense. One of the offerings is incense, ketores. And in their exuberance, in their excitement, in their enthusiasm to do the service of God, they bring an extra fire, an extra censer. And a terrible thing happens. A fire comes down from heaven and burns out their souls. They die instantly. And the Torah describes how they're lying there in the tabernacle, passed away, and their souls were taken out with the fire. So it was almost like They looked pure. They looked untouched. But of course, they were gone. They were punished. Their lives were taken. And the Torah describes, it says, when their father, the high priest Aaron, saw this, he remained silent, heartbroken. Of course, how could he not be? His two oldest sons taken on the first day of service to God. He remained silent. So what happened over here? Now, you're not talking about children who are little kids. You're talking about adult children. You're talking about very special people. They are the nephews of Moses. They're the children of Aaron. They were on the forefront at Mount Sinai. There was a group of people, Moses, Aaron, and the sons, that were permitted to go closer to the mountain at the giving of the Torah. They practically saw the face of God and heard God's voice. And yet, the first day of the dedication of the tabernacle, of the Mishkan, they die. And they bring, why do they die? Because they brought a foreign fire that God didn't ask for. They wanted to do more. They wanted to be even more dedicated. They were so enthusiastic. So we have to analyze what went wrong here.
But I have a question. Didn't God like know that they wanted to give them more? Like if God, like I believe that God knew because God knows everything.
Right.
So if he said like we're going to give like more, why would he like kill them, like take their legs off?
They were being punished for doing something that they thought was positive, not negative.
Right, obviously, yeah, exactly. The question is we have to analyze what happened here. And listen, let me ask you a question. Look, let's go back a little bit in time. Moshe comes down the mountain. Remember the story? He's worshiping the golden calf, remember?
Yes.
He takes the 10 commandments and he does what? He breaks them.
Yeah.
Margaret. And do you see Moshe being punished? Do you see his soul being lifted out of his body? He broke the 10 commandments, God's words. Yet, nothing happens to Moshe. Yet the minute Nadav and Avihu do a little extra fire, boom, gone, taken. What's going on over here? Why couldn't God reprimand them? Say, okay, you're no longer priests. Go out of my Mishkan. You're punished. Blah, blah, blah. What's going on over here? Why is God seemingly unforgiving with Nadav and Avihu? And when Moshe breaks the tablets, which maybe to me, I don't know, maybe in my eyes, maybe that's even worse. He broke the tablet. Not only when he breaks the tablets, when God eulogizes Moshe, when Moshe passes away, what does God write in Deuteronomy? And my great servant Moshe, who broke the tablets. God lauds him for breaking the tablets. I mean, remember we discussed why. He did it to save his people. He broke the marriage contract, so God can't say, look, my bride has cheated on me. My bride has left me to go with another God. So Moshe defended his people, so it was considered an act of self-sacrifice on behalf of Moshe, just reviewing what we discussed last time. But here, God is unforgiving in a sense.
Maybe it was arrogance.
Okay, very good. Maybe arrogance. It came from arrogance, possibly. Anybody else have any other insight? And also, once we discuss this, this is going to give us a very powerful insight into how we look at our relationship with God and our mission on earth, why we're here. We touched upon it other times, but it's going to underscore that. So let me do a little background with you, and then we'll go and dive into it. Is that okay?
Yep.
So the Torah asks the same question. All the commentaries ask this. So the commentaries reveal a few reasons why they thought Nadav and Avihu were killed instantly. First of all, the commentaries remind us very carefully that Nadav and Avihu were not regular guys. To be a Kohen Gadol, the father was the high priest, to be a priest at this moment in time, the first priestly family They're not regular people. They were a step above everyone else. They were very close to godliness, holy family, exceptional family, extraordinary family, our own sons. They grew up with the miracles of God, the divine presence, their uncle Moshe. From such people, God demands more than anyone else. The standard God holds them by is not like everybody else. God said to them, when you do my service, what I tell you to do in the temple, in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle, you can never deviate. It has to be to the letter of the law, exactly, precisely as I tell you. So when the priests throughout the generations did the work of God in the Beis HaMikdash, in the temple, and now in the tabernacle, they were not allowed to deviate. If God said you have to wear the 4 garments, the hat, the apron, the coat, and walk barefoot, they couldn't say, it was a hot day, I didn't need the apron. It was a hot day, I didn't need the hat. It was a hot day, I need socks, I don't want my feet to get cold. It was a cold day. God said this is how it had to be done. It had to be done precisely, exactly. When a doctor goes into surgery, he washes, he scrubs, he wears the hat, the mask, the shoe covers, the sterile outfit, the nurse wipes off his perspiration. He doesn't decide during surgery, I don't need a mask, it's a little bit too hot here. One germ can kill your patient. When the doctor goes on vacation, he could be in his bathing suit, he can wear flip-flops. Gesundheit, you don't have to wash your hands every 10 seconds. The tabernacle's like the surgical suite. It has to be exactly, precisely the way God said it to be. They decided to go into the holies of holies, where first of all, they were not permitted, says one of the commentaries. 2, and they brought a foreign fire, an extra fire. God said one fire, one type of incense. That was it. And it was showing a lesson for anyone else who feels they can go into the tabernacle and do things the way they want to do it, not the way God said. It doesn't wash in the tabernacle. This is not a beach resort. This is the Mishkan. This is my place. So it showed every Jewish man, woman, and child the sanctity and the power of this Mishkan, firstly. Now, when it came to Moshe the prophet and he broke the luchos, he broke the 10 commandments, a prophet is not a priest. A prophet molds with the times. When the Jewish people are facing challenges and pain, like by the destruction of the temples, the prophets came and comforted and spoke words of comfort. When the Jews were during the glorious time of the Beis HaMikdash, the prophets came and lauded them and said, keep the mitzvahs or else terrible things might happen. So the prophets change with the times. Their words adapt to their people. Their actions adapt to their people. Moshe knew he had to break the luchos to save his people. He broke the luchos. That's the difference between a prophet like Moses, a prophet like Jeremiah, a prophet like Ezekiel, a prophet like Elisha, a prophet like Elijah, than a priest who works in the Mishkan. A priest can never deviate. A priest does not adapt his concept to the tabernacle. A prophet has to be for the people. A priest has to be for God, no matter what. You cannot change the way. That's the difference. Moshe broke the luchos for his people. He had to. He knew what he had to do. Nadav and Avihu decided they wanted to go into the holies of holies without permission. Only the high priest is allowed to go in. 2, they wanted to bring an extra fire? Absolutely not. That's the difference. Just quickly, what the commentaries say. Why did they get their lives taken? So we discussed, one is they went into the holies of holies without permission. Only their father was permitted in once a year on Yom Kippur. 2, They brought a foreign fire. No one asked them to. God didn't say, I need an extra fire. I need a little more incense. So they took their own initiative when they should not have. 3, Nadav and Avihu were known to be gorgeously handsome, brilliant, respectable, kind, but they refused to get married. They said, listen, we will not get married because we don't feel we should get married. We have to be part of the divine. That's what the commentaries say. 4, when they were at Mount Sinai, about to receive the Torah, they became intoxicated. They drank. Why? Because they felt if they lose themselves, they'll be able to connect to divine. You know, sometimes when you get drunk, you get a little more loose, a little more receptive, you're less stiff, you're less nervous, you're less constrained. Number 4. So much better was expected of them. So the commentaries say their lives were taken. Every commentary has a different reason why. One said intoxication, they went to the holies. But there's a much more deeper understanding here of what happened. So either you could take one of the reasons that were aforementioned, why they got punished, or we can go deeper. I discussed this a while back with you. What was their intention? They felt they want to leave their body. They want to reconnect with God. They want to transcend the physical world and become one with God. They, in their minds, decided this is their mission, this is their purpose. To leave the body behind and be one with God. How do you do that? You transcend. We'll bring an extra fire. We'll go into the holies of holies. But they erred tremendously here. They died. They suffered the consequences. God did not put a person into the world for us to leave the world and become one with God. If God wanted angels, if God wanted little gods, little souls floating around, we wouldn't be in bodies. God put us into a body, into this world to serve God and bring light into this materialistic, simple, coarse universe. To take a rock and take out the diamond. To refine the oil, to refine the universe, to make it a better place, a godly place, in our limited bodies, in our limited world. God, this is God's greatest joy. That's why God created us. God did not ask us to go into transcendental meditation, to leave our bodies and soar into the world, soar into the divine and stay there. First of all, we can't handle it. And second of all, that's not what God created us. Nadav and Avihu, this is what they were aspiring. That's why they didn't get married. That's why they went into the holies of holies. We want to be one with God. They misunderstood their mission and purpose on earth. Many times you see this happening to people. They misunderstand why they're here. We are here in our limited bodies, in our very finite lives, in our very materialistic lives. When we're vacuuming, cooking, cleaning, working, selling stocks, buying stocks, shopping, having our hair done, we are here in this materialistic world to bring light and godliness into the very mundane. That's our mission, that's our purpose. God was not looking for little gods. God was not looking for angels and souls floating around like ghosts. God wants us to be in our world, doing the mitzvahs, imbuing our very lives with everything spiritual and godly. That's what God wants from us.
So I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
I know it doesn't really relate to like the thing that like you're telling us about like what happened with Aaron's sons, but like you just said that God wants us to like keep the like his mitzvahs and to like keep like his word. And like I was thinking a lot today, and like today's Yom HaShoah, And I was thinking, like, back then, like, Jews, of course, they were religious, traditional, there were like all type of things, like in every country, but like there were a lot of like religious people, and like there were people who did their mitzvahs and everything. So like I don't know, like how, like when people ask me like, how does your God makes you suffer that or whatever, like I know that after that we did get Israel, which is like good, that something had to happen in order to get like Israel. But at the same time, if we did what God wants us to do, like at the same time, what did he put us in a situation of destroying almost like all the like Am Israel, you know?
The basic question is, why do bad things happen to good people? Is that the question? Yeah.
I mean, yeah, like yeah, but
Yeah, I mean,
it's
it underscored all the thousands of children who were killed in the Holocaust. Children, innocent babies. What did they ever do?
right.
So this is, I have to tell you, the Lubavitcher Rebbe was asked the same question. And the answer is, we do not know why God brings so many, the Holocaust and tragedies, challenges, pain, and suffering to this world. We don't have the answer. But what we do know, what the Rebbe told people is that every challenge, every pain, everything we go through is a catalyst to transform your life for the better, for the better. And faith in God is understanding that we don't understand. So we cannot really change what happens to us, but we can change how we approach everything that happens to us. So when something terrible happens, you have two choices. You can give in to that horror. You can give up on your life. You can die, whether spiritually or physically, or you can take those moments, the pain, the horror, and the suffering, and turn it into something positive and change your life and say, I'm not going to allow this to define me. I'm not going to allow this to make me into a zombie, turn me into a victim. I will not be victimized. So everything that happens to us, we have to look at it and say, how can I utilize this to make myself a better person, a greater person? How can I take this moment of, and let me tell you, this is not an easy thing. You cannot go to a Holocaust survivor and say, oh, go transform your life. Forget about what happened. No. It's not a simple thing. This is a very, very difficult thing to do. And you have to be very sensitive. Eli Wiesel, I told the story, I'll tell it again. My father was very good friends with Eli Wiesel. He hated the world. He said, I'm an atheist. God has left us. And he would talk to my father every moment about it, how his life is horrible and over. So finally, my father said to him, Eli, I'm going to take you to meet someone who will help you with your life. And he took him to the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and they cried together. He told the Rebbe his story, how he was in Buchenwald and everything. And he cried, and the Rebbe cried, and they cried together. And the Rebbe said to him, Eli, we do not know why this happened. But I do know one thing, that you have to take what happened to you and turn it around and make your life grow from what happened to you. And Eli Wiesel writes about this. If you read his first novel and his later novels, you'll see a change of perspective. And he writes that the Rebbe transformed how he looked at himself, how he viewed himself. Sometimes you have to cry with somebody. There's no answers. You cry together, and that's the answer. We will cry together. We will hug each other and see how we can move forth from this terrible tragedy that happened to us. That's the only answer we have. How can I take these challenges, these tragedies, this pain, and use it as a catalyst for goodness and light into the world? This is what I remember. I shared that story of the old man who always was hugging kids, and my brother met him and he said, "Why do you always hug?" And he told the story how he went to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said to him, and he said, my life is miserable. I lost everybody in the Holocaust. And the Rebbe said to him, "Nothing is left." He said, "Nothing is left." He said, "But love, did you remember, did you love your family?" He says, "Yeah, I loved my family." So the Rebbe said, "But that was left, the love. Now take that love and give it to every child you see. And have a child." And he had a child, and that's why he hugs all the children. So again, taking from your deepest, deepest recess, something that's left, and utilizing it to build your world again. It's very challenging, it's very hard, but it can be done. Slowly but surely. Slowly but surely, you could do it. Now that's really what it is. And again, everything that we study doesn't happen overnight. It's a process. It's changing the way you think. It's changing the way you look at things. Realizing that every moment in your life can either be part of a big portrait, or it could just be pieces flying in the wind. When you wake up in the morning and you know that you have a mission and purpose on this earth, and you were born, God put you on this earth for a purpose, then anything you do is part of your puzzle to create that portrait of your life. Even when you go for a manicure, pedicure, shopping for clothes, and eating kosher, and going to shul and praying, and giving tzedakah, and then going to a sports game and watching a show. Everything now is part of a puzzle and creating your portrait. But if you wake up in the morning and you don't realize that you have a godly mission on earth, then everything you do is just a piece flowing in the wind. It's never going to create a picture. It's never going to create a finished product, because it's just pieces. What ties it all together is that you have a godly soul and a mission and purpose on earth. And that's what brings the mundane together with the holy, the simple together with the complicated, the godly with the ungodly things in life. You understand what I'm saying? So if you want to create that portrait of life, you have to make sure everything is connected by a glue. What's the glue? Your mission on earth, to bring godliness into this world. Even in the simplest way. That's the secret. That's the secret. So to conclude, so Nadav and Avihu did not realize that their mission was to be on earth, not to transcend and be one with God. That's not what God asks of us. God asks us to be in this world and use this world as a catalyst for light, goodness, joy, charitable acts of goodness, acts of kindness, and mitzvahs. And that's what God wants from us. And this is the story. And Aaron doesn't speak and that's where we get the custom that during Shiva, when you go and see someone, you let them talk first. It's a moment of silence. Because also, exactly what Nora said, that when tragedy strikes, there's nothing to be said. There's no words that can comfort. Sometimes not saying anything is more powerful than saying. When you go to a shiva and someone has a tragedy, you don't start telling them, "I also had a tragedy. I also had pain and suffering." That's what they want to hear. They want to hear that you are there for them. A hug, silence is sometimes more powerful than anything else. Sometimes you have to know when not to say something. My daughter was going for a shiva call to her friend, lost her father, and she says, "Ma, what should I say? It's so uncomfortable." I said, "Don't say anything. Sit down and shah. You don't have to say anything. You're there for her. Why are you there? For her? You don't have to sometimes speak. Some people think blah, 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 blah. No, just sit quietly. If she wants to say something to you, she'll say it." That's why they say Shiva, you have to remember, wait, why am I talking? Wait, why am I talking? Shah, you don't have to say anything. Definitely don't share your own tragedies. That's not what we want to hear. So Aaron is silent because there's nothing to be said. We know he's suffering. We know he feels pain, but he's silent because that's what it is. Sometimes silence is the only response. So the Torah emphasized, and Aaron was silent. Aaron was quiet at that time. We'll end with silence. So thank you very much. And next week we will continue once again. And